Hello everyone, I'm Michael Voris.
And I'm Simon Rafe. Welcome to Moral Compass.
In disease, injury, suffering, since the fall of Adam and Eve, illness and death have plagued the human race. But they've also challenged us and given us an opportunity to take care of others, to seek relief and comfort for those who suffer, and to find treatments and cures for those who are ill. Stem cell research carries with it a great deal of hope for advancing our efforts to cure the sick.
Now, their human dignity demands that we seek these cures, but that same dignity, present in every human being, demands that we distinguish what kind of research we will accept and what kind we will not accept. As we recall the words of Pope John Paul II, let us pause and reason together.
When I see your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and stars that you set in place, what are humans that you are mindful of them? Mere mortals that you care for them. Yet you have made them little less than a god, crown them with glory and honor.
Catholics know that human beings have great dignity. We're made to the image and likeness of God. We know that, men and women. We have the desire for the truth and the ability to seek it freely. And we're capable of love, even of selfless sacrifice for others, even the point of martyrdom. But whether we are a believer or a non-believer, much of our understanding of what is right and wrong is based on a basic belief and a great value in the great value of the human being, whose freedom and intelligence surpasses that of any other creature on earth.
Today, there is much talk about stem cell research. Not only because it holds the potential for important advances in the treatment and curing of diseases, but also because the Catholic Church and others condemn some of it as a grave violation of human life.
Stem cells are the building blocks that all the specialized cells in our bodies come from, like the stem cell from plants that eventually branches out to leaves and thorns and flowers. Stem cells are the main cells from which all the other cells in our bodies branch out. Now, stem cells don't have the specialized function of, say, skin cells or muscle cells or heart cells, but instead they are so flexible that they can become any one of these or many of the other many cells in our body. Because they have this ability, as well as the ability to renew themselves indefinitely, stem cells can be used to grow brand new cells to replace or heal damaged tissue in our body.
There's a lot of confusion and misinformation about the topic. Sadly, some of it may be intentional. So, what exactly is the Church's position without the media spin? And how do we understand what human dignity demands as we enter the brave new world of stem cell research? We need to look more closely at both of these questions.
To some of these sources, you might think there's only one way to obtain stem cells. They can be harvested from human embryos and the tissue of dead fetuses. But they are also found in tissues that have to do with birth, like umbilical cord blood, or the placenta and amniotic fluid, and even in various tissues and organs of adults, like, say, bone marrow, the lining of the nose, and even in fat. Now, where you get the stem cells will determine whether they can become any one of the 220 cells in the body, or if they have a shorter list of possibilities. Those that come from adult tissues, for example, have already undergone some of the changes along the path to becoming a certain cell type, like those of, say, the circulatory system, but they are still flexible enough to become many different types of cells within that category. Where you get the stem cell from is also significant for determining whether that type of stem cell research is morally right or morally wrong.
Contrary to what is sometimes falsely implied, the Catholic Church is not against stem cell research. The Church strictly narrows her opposition to the types of stem cell research that involve the destruction of human life. But only two types of stem cell research involve this kind of destruction: the use of embryonic stem cells and cells harvested from aborted babies. There isn't a moral objection to any of the other types of stem cell research. In fact, as a matter of mercy, the Church supports scientific research and promotes efforts to discover treatments and cures for illnesses. What the Church is against is something that all people of goodwill should be against: the idea that one can do evil in the hope that good might come of it. Science is not exempt from requirements of right and wrong any more than we are.
In this clip from the movie Men in Black, Tommy Lee Jones and Will Smith have essentially the same problem that some people have in understanding why embryonic stem cell research is wrong. They think for something to be important, it can't be very, very small.
Right now, my flight's leaving. Wow, get your paws off!
Call the pound, we got a stray.
The dog owes my friend money.
Killian's and Bugs, Frank, what do you know?
I know nothing.
Not a thing.
They're rehearsing a ventriloquist act.
The galaxy is here!
What do you mean here?
Galaxies, hundreds of millions of stars and planets. How's it here?
You humans, when are you gonna learn that size doesn't matter? Just because something's important doesn't mean it's not very, very small.
How small?
Tiny, like the size of a marble or a jewel. Now, if you'll excuse me, I gotta be walked before my flight.
All right, get out of here.
But the moral argument is that size doesn't matter. However small, the human embryo is a living human being created in the image and likeness of God by God Himself. Like all human beings, the embryo has a right to his or her own life and the right not to have the cells that belong to him harvested for someone else's use, especially when the process of harvesting them actually takes his life. Embryonic stem cell research always involves the destruction of the embryo, and so this research violates the most basic dignity of a human being.
Actually, it is. Before we can commit some kind of atrocity, we always have to dehumanize the victim. In the case of human embryo research, the argument goes like this. The 3 to 5 day old embryos used for research are just tiny clusters of cells. They don't have any more moral value than the bone marrow cells we take from a donor. But this is not true. Even the scientists doing this research know that there is a profound difference between a mere cluster of cells and a human being in its earliest stages of development.
Dr. James A. Thompson, working out of the University of Wisconsin in 1998, was one of the first to harvest stem cells from human embryos, killing them in the process. In a New York Times interview, he admitted that from the beginning, he had ethical concerns about the work he was doing. He said, "If human embryonic stem cell research does not make you at least a little uncomfortable, you have not thought about it enough."
Imagine for a moment a cluster of bone marrow cells in a petri dish. With the right conditions, they might be able to divide and produce more human stem cells. But no matter how long they grow, they will never be a whole living organism, only a small part of the one that they came from. Now, some might say that the human embryo at 5 days is just a cluster of cells, but that's only in the sense that an adult human being is just a bigger cluster of cells. Like an adult, the human embryo is a whole living organism unto itself. The human embryo isn't a potential human being, it is a human being, one that has the potential to grow into an adult, not to grow into a human. It already is a human. Still not sure? Well, check out the DNA. The DNA of a bone marrow stem cell will be the same as the individual being it came from. That tells you that it is a smaller part of a whole. But unless the embryo has an identical twin, the DNA of the embryo won't match anyone else in the universe, now, past, or future. Not its mother, not its father, not anyone else. In other words, the embryo is not a smaller part of someone else's body, it is its own body. The embryo is a unique human being unlike anyone else ever created before. And the difference is clear. The embryo possesses human dignity, a cluster of bone marrow cells does not. It's a fact that lots of human embryos conceived during intercourse don't implant in the uterus and end up dying naturally. So you may have heard people ask, what's the difference if we wind up destroying them? But that's like saying that because hurricanes naturally take thousands of lives, it's morally permissible to gun down thousands of people ourselves. Others argue that thousands of leftover embryos lie frozen in fertility clinics, embryos that are destined to be thrown away because they are unwanted. They argue that since their deaths are already decided, we should be permitted to destroy them in order to harvest their stem cells. If they're going to die anyway, why not, some people ask. They say this is the same reasoning already being used today by the Communist government of China. As early as 1994, Human Rights Watch published reports that prisoners on death row were being kept alive as a reliable source for organ transplants. Since that time, China has built a booming trade in tourist transplant. According to reports, the method and day of execution were based on the organ they wished to harvest, and the definition of brain dead was changed so that they could harvest the organs before the prisoner actually dies. Everyone in the Western world would agree that this is a huge violation of human rights. And yet, by the same reasoning, it makes sense. Well, they're going to die anyway, right? So why not? The answer is obvious. Human beings, even those who are going to die, can never be treated like objects. Love requires that every decision involving them must be made with their good in mind, even a prisoner on death row and even a fetus. But don't embryonic stem cells have more promise? They're better because they're more immature and therefore more flexible. Actually, in a sense, this makes things worse. Immature stem cells grow way too fast like cancers do, and in fact tend to form bizarre tumors called teratomas. A teratoma is a tumor that contains all different kinds of cells like hair, teeth, nerve, muscle, and so forth. And this has been a very big problem for research and scientists. Compare this to an adult stem cell, which is very stable and doesn't develop into tumors.
This is untrue. For all the money that has been spent on them and all the years of research, embryonic stem cells are still way behind. There were no clinical trials until 2009, and this trial was shut down, restarted, and in 2011 eventually given up on. So far, other trials have yielded no significant results. On the other hand, adult stem cells are currently being used in hundreds of clinical trials to treat more than 72 different diseases and injuries. And some of those treatments are now past the clinical trials phase and are available to the public. This is also false. Adult stem cells can be manipulated to turn back to their embryonic state. These are called induced pluripotent stem cells. These can potentially do everything that the real ones can, but without killing an embryo. This is probably also false. Embryonic stem cells will likely always have one problem that adult stem cells don't have. They do not match the cells of the person receiving them. This means they're likely to be rejected, causing post-graft disease, which requires a lifetime of anti-rejection medication. But adult stem cells, because they come from you, match your body perfectly and won't be rejected. That's a clear plus. If all of this is true, then why on earth are scientists pushing so hard for funding to keep embryonic stem cell research going? That's a good question to ask. There's actually one thing that an embryo can do that adult stem cells can't. They can grow into a fully formed human being. Dr. Robert George, professor of jurisprudence at Princeton University, has been talking about this at length for years. Back in 2005, he wrote an article called Fetal Attraction, in which he noticed that embryonic stem cell researchers did not seem happy about the discovery of ways to get embryonic stem cells without killing the embryo. He suggested that the likely reason was ominous.
Up to now, embryonic stem cell advocates have claimed that they are only interested in stem cells harvested from embryos at the blastocyst, or 5 to 6 day stage. They have denied any intention of implanting embryos either in the uterus of a volunteer or in an artificial womb in order to harvest cells, tissues, or organs at more advanced stages of embryonic development or in the fetal stage. Advocates are well aware that most Americans, including those who are prepared to countenance the destruction of very early embryos, are not ready to approve the macabre practice of fetus farming. However, based on the literature I have read and the evasive answers given by spokesmen for the biotechnology industry at meetings of the President's Council on Bioethics, I fear that the long-term goal is indeed to create an industry in harvesting late embryonic and fetal body parts for use in regenerative medicine and organ transplantation.
Well, it seems he was right. Passed by the New Jersey legislature in 2004. Assembly Bill 2840 was billed as an anti-cloning measure. But notice the deception. The law did make cloning a crime in the first degree, but cloning is defined in an unprecedented way, cultivating the cell through the egg, embryo, fetal, and newborn stages into a new human individual. That means that the crime of cloning would not occur unless the child is allowed to be born. But allowing the cloned child to grow up to and include the 9-month gestation before harvesting its organs has become legal in the state of New Jersey. And the biotech industry worked fast and furious to pass similar laws in every state of the nation, using deceptive marketing to hide the true goals of their legislation, and along the way duping many into supporting these laws without ever understanding what it was they were voting for. Now, since then, such efforts have been pushed back by a not too well-known Fetus Farming Prohibition Act of 2006. Talk about a slippery slope. Growing babies to harvest their parts? How could we even think of such a thing?
There is a way which seems right to a man, but its end is the way to death.
To get from harvesting stem cells from a 5-year-old embryo to harvesting organs and tissues from a fetus at 9 months gestation is actually not that much of a leap. The reasoning used for the first is completely consistent with the reasoning used for the second. There is no doubting that a human embryo is a member of the human species. It is a complete, singular, living human organism. But if we can kill an embryo to harvest its parts, our human dignity and value is not based on simply being human. Instead, it's based on our abilities and level of development. If the life of an embryo is in danger because it lacks certain abilities, human dignity is based on things that change from one person to another, and if that's true, all of us are at risk.
When we find out that a child has been conceived, we know that something momentous has happened. The reality of the tiny human life now present impresses itself upon us strongly, and thoughts run through our mind of the potential this life possesses. Embryonic stem cell research involves the direct and deliberate taking of a human life, a life with the same reality and same inherent potential as any new life conceived within the mother's womb.
For you created my inmost being, you knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you, because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful, I know that full well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in the secret place, when I was woven together in the depths of the earth. Your eyes saw my unformed body. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be.
Each and every one of us was once an embryo. Alive, growing, unique, full of potential and loved by God. We were small, but we were important. Our lives mattered. But some would question whether we have value and dignity. In mankind's dark history, the question of whether some humans have dignity has been asked many times before.
As the American Catholic bishops wrote in 2008, if fundamental rights such as the right to life are based on abilities or qualities that can appear or disappear, grow or diminish, and be greater or lesser in different human beings, then there are no inherent human rights, no true human equality, only privileges for the strong. Ultimately, this is what embryonic stem cell research implies. Shortly after Christ was made incarnate in the womb of the Virgin Mary, while he was still a tiny embryo, his mother visited her cousin Elizabeth.
Blessed are you among women, and blessed is the fruit of your womb.
Elizabeth recognized the great value of the tiny embryonic life within Mary's body.
And how does this happen to me, that the mother of my Lord should come to me?
Even though he was an embryo, unable to do anything but grow and develop, utterly dependent on the care of others, he was still the Lord God, the Prince of Peace. He was still a person, a son, possessing an unimaginable value and potential.
He wasn't valuable because of what he could or could not do as a tiny embryo. He was valuable because of who he was and where he came from. I'm Michael Voris, and this has been Moral Compass.
I'm Simon Rafe. God bless.